Right now, investigations are underway in at least 2 Metro Detroit cities after the head of the FBI announced that the agency thwarted a terror attack this morning in Michigan.
3 o'clock in the morning, Traverse City, Michigan, a land of crystal clear lakes and peaceful tourism, suddenly plunges into deadly darkness. Hundreds of kilograms of fentanyl, methamphetamine, and heroin are quietly flooding in through the very famous tourist port under the signature of someone no one ever suspected, Port Director Dana Whitford. A powerful woman who turned the harbor into a private gateway for the Sinaloa Cartel, laundered hundreds of millions of dollars through tribal casinos, bribed the Coast Guard, and transformed northern Michigan schools into drug markets. Tonight, 620 federal agents launch a simultaneous assault gunfire echoing along the icy lakeshore. This is not just the largest drug bust in Michigan history. This is the story of an entire region taken over from within by organized crime. Are you ready to face the dark truth? Northern Michigan has been gravely infiltrated. Criminal networks are mobilizing on a massive scale. At 3 o'clock in the morning in Traverse City, Michigan, darkness engulfs an unprecedented crisis. Organized crime syndicates are silently drowning entire towns in a flood of contraband. The Federal Bureau of Investigation and the Department of Homeland Security are launching an emergency raid on the Port Director's office. Nighttime cargo unloading zones, casinos laundering millions of dollars, all of it paints a grim picture of a Michigan that nearly collapsed entirely. Precisely at 3 o'clock in the morning, northern Michigan is under red alert. What began as a routine inspection at Traverse City Port swiftly escalated into one of the most alarming maritime security breaches in the state's history. FBI and DHS agents pried open a container flagged as priority import cargo only to uncover a deadly stockpile of illegal narcotics inside. The seized quantities totaled 200 kilograms of fentanyl, 500 kilograms of methamphetamine, and 62 kilograms of heroin, an amount large enough to devastate entire major population centers if it had reached the streets. In addition to the enormous volume of drugs, agents discovered an industrial-grade GPS jammer, specialized equipment used to make cartel vessels vanish from Coast Guard tracking systems. Every crate bore the unmistakable markings of the Sinaloa Cartel. Yet the true shock came from the accompanying paperwork. Every signature, permit, and clearance code pointed to a single individual, Port Director Dana Whitford. Federal teams stormed her office just minutes later. Inside, they discovered $2.3 million in cash, meticulously packed into waterproof suitcases, 14 restricted access badges issued to unidentified individuals, a loaded 9mm pistol, and detailed documents outlining the expansion of an inland fuel pipeline, in reality, a cover for an underground smuggling corridor designed to push Sinaloa product deep into Michigan territory. The truth became undeniable in the face of this evidence. For 4 years, Whitford had quietly transformed a peaceful tourist harbor into a custom-built gateway for organized crime. This investigation has plunged deep into Michigan's hidden network. The port director of Traverse City, Michigan, has been arrested for running a smuggling pipeline for the Sinaloa Cartel. As federal investigators dug deeper into the records seized from Dana Whitford's office, the scope of her operation revealed itself to be far more sinister than mere smuggling facilitation. Whitford had not simply allowed cartel cargo to pass through Traverse City, she had engineered a complete maritime distribution system that reached deep into northern lower Michigan. Over the course of 4 years of quietly redesigning the port's shipping schedules, she created 4 secret receiving zones around Grand Traverse Bay, isolated unmonitored pockets where cartel shipments could be offloaded under cover of night with virtually no oversight. These locations perfectly matched Coast Guard logs, showing unexplained vessel movements and mysterious maintenance lights along the shoreline at night. The trail of bribes made the picture even clearer. Federal interviews confirmed that Whitford had been paying monthly bribes to multiple Coast Guard officers, granting Sinaloa boats access to the so-called fast lane, a clearance channel supposedly reserved only for emergency or high-priority maritime traffic. Investigators discovered that some vessels were approved in under 7 minutes, completely bypassing inspection procedures that normally take hours. But the most disturbing revelations did not come from the port itself, they came from the community. Distribution maps uncovered a direct pipeline from Whitford's shipments to 7 high schools scattered across northern Michigan. Teachers had already reported a sharp spike in methamphetamine and counterfeit pills among students, some as young as 15. Local dealers told undercover agents that product up north was cheap, potent, and always in stock. At the same time, Traverse City had quietly become a dumping ground for out-of-county drug offenders sent there for treatment, a policy loophole that flooded the region with untreated addicts and vulnerable individuals who were quickly targeted by local distributors. This was no longer a single smuggling route. It was a structural collapse engineered from inside the port and allowed to spread through neighborhoods, schools, and entire towns. By the time agents finished mapping the network of sites tied to Dana Whitford Geld's operation, one conclusion was inescapable. Northern Michigan had been compromised from the shoreline to the inland forests. More than 41 locations, including warehouses, boathouses, fishing cabins, storage yards, and even abandoned resorts, were all linked to her maritime pipeline. Federal command knew they could not hit the sites one by one. They needed a total simultaneous sweep. At 2:30 in the morning, inside an FBI security coordination room in Traverse City, the order was given: launch Operation Northern Breakwater. In a matter of moments, 620 agents from the FBI, DHS, and DEA poured toward pre-staged vehicles across Petoskey, Alpena-Mackinac City, and the Grand Traverse region. What had begun as a quiet night on the lakeshore turned into a storm of flashing blue lights, armored convoys, and the slicing roar of helicopter rotors cutting through the frigid November air. The first strike team moved in on a riverside warehouse just south of Clinch Park, suspected to be the main receiving hub for Whitford's fast lane boats. The moment agents breached the steel doors with explosives, chaos erupted inside. Sinaloa lookouts scattered among stacks of fish crates, firing blindly toward the entry point. Flashbang grenades detonated, flooding the space with blinding white light as tactical teams advanced in tight formation. In minutes, agents secured 112 sealed packages awaiting distribution. If the familiar port director you trusted was quietly clearing hundreds of kilograms of fentanyl every week, would you have noticed any signs at all? Meanwhile, in Petoskey, a 3-story storage building proved far more stubborn. The criminals inside had fortified the ground floor with steel plates and makeshift barricades. As the breach team approached, gunmen opened fire from the second-floor balcony, pinning down the initial assault wave. A DHS armored vehicle rolled forward, absorbing bursts of gunfire before slamming through the barricaded entrance. The firefight lasted exactly 14 minutes, ending only when federal agents overwhelmed the defenders with coordinated stairwell pushes. To the east, near Alpena, Coast Guard tactical units intercepted 2 small boats attempting to flee into deeper water. Floodlights from helicopters turned the bay into daylight as boat crews shouted commands in both English and Spanish. When one vessel throttled up toward open water, a Coast Guard cutter cut across its bow, forcing the crew to surrender. The most dramatic confrontation unfolded outside Charlevoix, where agents located a remote storage yard hidden behind a lumber mill. As they closed in, 3 pickup trucks tried to escape down a narrow forest road. Drones tracked their movement from above, guiding ground units into position. A roadblock was set up near a clearing. Spike strips were deployed. Engines roared, brakes screamed. One truck attempted to ram through the barricade but was boxed in when federal vehicles closed from both sides. Occupants were dragged out and subdued as the remaining trucks gave up. By dawn, all 18 strike teams had reported mission success. Dozens of suspects were in custody. Drug caches, weapons, and maritime equipment were secured. Northern Michigan had just witnessed the largest anti-cartel operation in state history, a single night in which federal forces reclaimed every inch of territory Dana Whitford had handed over to the Sinaloa organization. As the dust settled after the all-night raids, federal analysts returned to a quieter battlefield conference tables inside the temporary command center, where laptops, servers, seized documents, and external drives from Dana Whitford's office were spread out like artifacts from a hidden criminal government. What investigators uncovered in the hours that followed was not chaos, but chilling precision, a financial system engineered with the meticulous discipline of a multinational corporation. The first breakthrough came from a locked steel briefcase pulled from beneath Whitford's desk. Inside were 37 consulting accounts tied to shell companies with innocuous names like Great Lakes Marine Advisors, North Shores Development, and Harbor Efficiency Group. At first glance, they appeared to be ordinary vendor programs, but as forensic accountants dug deeper, every single account linked directly to the arrival of specific vessels, matching timestamps from Coast Guard logs and container scans with surgical accuracy. Every invoice turned out to mirror the movement of an illicit shipment. Whitford had built a three-tier financial pipeline. Tier 1, port to casino. Money collected at the docks from delivery fees and drug profits was funneled into 2 tribal casinos. There, Whitford's associates used slot machines, table chips, and player cards registered under fake identities to disguise millions of dollars in cartel revenue. Local seniors later recalled seeing strangers arrive at the casinos in the dead of night, placing large bets, cashing out quickly, and vanishing just as quietly. Tier 2 casino to Mexico. Once the money appeared clean, it was wired in structured amounts to accounts in Arizona and Wisconsin. These accounts were controlled by cartel money movers. From there, the funds flowed south to Mexico through cryptocurrency platforms and remittance channels disguised as business refunds. Tier 3, Mexico back to Michigan. The cycle closed when Sinaloa wired money right back to Whitford's shell companies under the cover of coastal improvement investments or maritime consulting contracts. The entire system ran like clockwork week after week. The single most damning piece of evidence was a hidden spreadsheet buried inside a folder labeled Q2 Logistics. In plain text, it recorded weekly inbound money at $4.7 million, proof that Whitford's network was moving an average of $4.7 million every 7 days straight into the cartel's pockets. In total, agents estimated that more than $163.4 million had been laundered through these casino routes. But the investigation did not stop at the money. Analysts uncovered a second set of documents, including internal memos, encrypted chat logs, and Coast Guard clearance requests revealing that Whitford had been paying $12,000 a month to 3 identified Coast Guard officers in exchange for smooth passage of suspicious vessels. Some of those officers had even flagged their own colleagues for reassignment to ensure only cooperating crews were on duty during cartel deliveries. Deeper analysis exposed an outer ring of enablers beyond the Port 4 casino managers who routinely approved high-value chip conversions without paperwork, and 2 real estate developers who leased lakeside cabins that later became distribution hubs. The evidence painted a devastating picture. This was not mere corruption. This was financial colonization, a hostile takeover of northern Michigan's economy, orchestrated by organized crime with Whitford as its chief architect. What began at the port had quietly and methodically spread into the region's banks, casinos, development projects, and maritime infrastructure. Federal agents now understood they were not simply dismantling a smuggling ring, they were ripping apart a shadow economy built by the cartel along the shores of Lake Michigan. While financial teams traced the money-making machines Whitford had engineered, a separate investigative unit was given a different mission to measure the human damage she left behind. What they uncovered in the next 48 hours was not just criminal activity. It was a regional collapse, a slow-motion unraveling of northern Michigan's social fabric that had gone unnoticed for years. The first unmistakable sign of collapse showed up in the medical data when overdose cases in Grand Traverse skyrocketed 310% in just 3 years. The crisis spilled beyond the cities, sweeping into quiet lakeside towns and retirement communities, forcing EMS to respond in places that had never seen it before, like boat docks and gas stations. Investigators discovered that Whitford's product had flowed through an underground distribution network rooted in 27 small towns. Their opportunists turned into micro-distribution hubs, pushing fentanyl and meth at breakneck speed. Supply was so abundant that street prices crashed to record lows, deliberately drowning the entire region in a meticulously engineered addiction pandemic. The real tragedy struck when 7 high schools from Traverse City to Gaylord were swallowed by the wave of forbidden substances. Teachers stood stunned as drugs reached students as easily as soft drinks, while school hallways reeked of chemicals drifting from lockers. Parents watched helplessly as their children fell before they could even grasp what was happening, a direct consequence of Whitford's pipeline. At the same time, the region faced another crisis from the influx of relocated parolees shipped in from elsewhere. The criminal network ruthlessly exploited these vulnerable homeless individuals, turning them into runner's bait or mules in the dark money laundering machine. Many workers were paid in drugs instead of cash, fueling a devastating surge in addiction. Small businesses took a brutal hit. Convenience stores and motels near the highways turned into late-night deal spots for Whitford's network. Some lakeside motels quietly converted into temporary stash houses. Neighbors mistook the strange traffic for seasonal tourism when it was actually a criminal logistics system silently taking control of the area. Law enforcement was stretched to the breaking point by record-breaking thefts, roadside arrests, and rising violence, all perfectly mapping onto the drug supply routes, while they remained completely unaware that the nerve center sat right inside the Traverse City Harbor Master's office. It started quietly with the expansion of fuel pipelines that were cleverly disguised to conceal the construction of a secret smuggling channel. Over time, she stacked on new pieces. Friendly casino managers bought off Coast Guard officers, shell company accountants, and local distributors who funneled product into schools, motels, and small-town neighborhoods. By the time federal agencies finally struck, she had turned the Traverse City Harbor into a fully operational Sinaloa gateway. What looked like scattered criminal incidents, overdoses, violent disputes, and sudden spikes in cash movement were actually the symptoms of one single hidden machine. The fallout from Operation Northern Breakwater rippled across the state within hours. Dozens of organization members were hauled into federal custody, including several carrying fake maritime IDs tied directly to Whitford's office. Seemingly harmless port employees were suddenly exposed as strategically placed gatekeepers whose job was to block inspections and reroute vessel tracking. 3 Coast Guard officers admitted they had been receiving steady monthly payments from Whitford to wave suspicious boats through restricted lanes, and 4 casino supervisors confessed to rubber stamping massive chip conversions without paperwork, laundering millions in dirty profits. What stunned investigators most was how fast the numbers added up. The seized narcotics, fentanyl, methamphetamine, heroin matched perfectly with the overdose spikes that had swept the region. The cash discovered in Whitford's office lined up exactly with ledger entries showing the organization's weekly income flow, and the money laundered through the 2 tribal casinos traced directly to the estimated volume processed through chip exchanges and slot machine cycles. For the first time, federal agencies could see the architecture of the entire operation, not in fragments, but as one single tightly run enterprise. Whitford was found 7 hours after the raid began, hiding inside a rented cabin near Torch Lake. She didn't resist, but investigators noted she seemed almost relieved, as if the collapse of her criminal empire had become inevitable. Her arrest ended the most sophisticated maritime infiltration Michigan had ever faced. Yet it raised questions no one could ignore. As the federal teams prepared their final briefings, one conclusion stood out above all the data. Northern Michigan hadn't simply been exploited. It had been strategically engineered into a cartel gateway, quietly, efficiently, and almost undetected. Operation Northern Breakwater had shut that gateway down, but its lesson echoed far beyond the shoreline. One document highlighted 19 separate charity donations, all of which had been redirected into cartel-controlled accounts in Guadalajara. Even more disturbing was a folder labeled Nexus containing the names, photos, and employee profiles of 48 airport staff quietly recruited or coerced into aiding CJNG baggage handlers, loading supervisors, night shift security, runway escorts, and even 2 TSA contractors. Approved high-value chip conversions without paperwork, and 2 real estate developers who leased lakeside cabins that later became distribution hubs. The Dana Whitford story delivers a bone-chilling lesson. The most dangerous corruption isn't the gunfire or the duffel bags of bribe money, but the seemingly harmless signatures on clearance forms, the schedule changes just to be more efficient, the charity donations to the local schools. One single person parked in the right seat of power patient for years can turn a tourist harbor into a narco gateway and schools into drug markets without anyone noticing until it's too late. The vulnerability isn't out on some distant border, it's right inside the blind belief that it can't happen here. Keep asking questions, keep verifying, because silence itself is complicity. As the sun rises over Grand Traverse Bay, northern Michigan has reclaimed its shoreline, but the scars remain hundreds of shattered families, schools forever stained with dark memories, and a costly lesson the entire country cannot afford to forget. Dana Whitford proved that a single person in a position of power can quietly sell an entire region to organized crime. Operation Northern Breakwater slammed that door shut. But how many other Whitfords are sitting in seemingly harmless offices right now? Drop a comment. What do you think is the biggest vulnerability that lets crime seep into our communities? The ports, the casinos, or plain old human complacency? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss the next hidden truth. See you soon.